At 79 years old, a quiet grandfather asked his 19-year-old granddaughter one simple question on an ordinary Sunday evening. What happened next stunned him. She broke down crying instantly, right there on the porch, and what she revealed in the minutes that followed uncovered a secret she had been hiding from her entire family for almost a year. This is a story about two generations, one hidden pain, and a single question that changed everything. The question sounds ordinary. The reason behind the tears is anything but. Stay until the very end, because the lesson her grandfather shares is one every family needs to hear. Walter Higgins was 79 years old, a retired mechanic who had spent half a century fixing what other people thought was broken beyond repair. He lived in a small house on Maple Street, the same house where he raised two children and buried his wife 6 years earlier. Every Sunday afternoon, his 19-year-old granddaughter, Emily, came to visit, carrying 2 coffees and the same easy smile she had worn since she was a little girl. For years, those Sunday visits were the brightest hours of Walter's week, filled with laughter, old stories, and the comfortable silence only family can share. Neighbors often said Walter was the kind of man who noticed everything but said very little, the type of quiet observer who could tell when something was wrong long before anyone admitted it out loud. Emily was in her 2nd year of college, the first person in the family to leave their hometown for a bigger life, and everyone assumed she was thriving. She posted cheerful photos online, smiled in every picture, and always said she was doing great whenever anyone asked. But lately, something had shifted, and Walter, a man who had spent decades reading engines and people with equal precision, could feel it before he could explain it. Emily's hugs at the door had grown shorter. Her laughter, once loud and unguarded, had become quieter, almost rehearsed. She checked her phone more than she used to, then quickly put it face down whenever she caught him watching. Walter told himself it was just the chaos of being young, the pressure of exams, the natural distance that grows when grandchildren become adults. Still, every Sunday he noticed a little more. She would start a sentence about school and stop halfway through. She would laugh at something funny, but her eyes would stay somewhere far away. One evening in early spring, Emily arrived later than usual, her makeup slightly smudged, claiming she had simply gotten something in her eye. Walter said nothing that day, but he began paying closer attention to the small signals most people would have missed entirely. He noticed she avoided talking about her friends, her grades, and her future, 3 subjects she used to discuss with excitement. He noticed she ate less at dinner, picked at her food, and apologized for things that needed no apology. He noticed how often she said the words, "I'm fine," a phrase Walter had learned, over 79 years of life, almost never meant fine at all. By the 4th week, Walter could no longer ignore the quiet alarm rising inside him. He thought about asking her directly what was wrong, but he knew from experience that direct questions often built walls instead of breaking them. So instead, on a warm Sunday evening as they sat together on the porch watching the sky turn orange, Walter decided to ask something simpler, something that seemed almost too small to matter. He turned to Emily, looked at her gently, and asked one question that had nothing to do with school, friends, or social media. He simply asked, "When was the last time you did something only because it made you happy, and not because it made you look good to someone else?" For a moment, Emily said nothing at all. Her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, suddenly tightened around her coffee cup. Her eyes filled instantly, and before she could stop herself, she broke down crying right there on the porch. Walter did not rush to comfort her with words. He simply sat beside her, let the silence hold space for her pain, and waited until she was ready to speak. When Emily finally found her voice, what she revealed broke her grandfather's heart in ways he never expected. She admitted that for the past year, she had been living 2 completely different lives, one she showed online, and one she was actually living inside. The smiling photos hid sleepless nights spent comparing herself to classmates who seemed to be succeeding effortlessly. The cheerful captions hid an exhausting fear that she was falling behind in a race everyone else seemed to be winning. She confessed that she scrolled through other people's achievements late at night, feeling smaller with every post, even though she knew, somewhere deep down, that most of it wasn't the full picture. She admitted she had stopped calling her old friends because she felt embarrassed about her grades, ashamed of her anxiety, and terrified of disappointing the family who had sacrificed so much for her education. She said the hardest part wasn't failing, it was the fear of being seen as ordinary in a world that worshipped extraordinary. Walter listened to every word without interrupting, without judging, and without offering quick solutions the way younger generations often expected from advice. When Emily finished speaking, Walter took a long, slow breath, the kind of breath that carries 79 years of memory inside it, and began to speak. He told her that in his 80 years on Earth, he had never once, not a single time, met a truly happy person who built their life around comparison. He told her about the men he worked beside in the factory, men who chased bigger houses and louder achievements, only to discover they had no one to truly call at the end of a hard day. He told her that the loneliest people he had ever known were often the ones who looked the most successful from the outside. He said that success without someone to share it with was just a quieter, better-dressed version of loneliness, and that he had buried friends who never once admitted how alone they truly felt. He explained that being loved quietly by a few people mattered infinitely more than being admired loudly by strangers who would forget her name by morning. He told her something his own father once told him, that the world will always show you someone doing better, but it will never show you the price they paid behind closed doors. Emily listened, tears still falling, but something in her shoulders began to loosen for the first time in months. Walter reminded her that he had not built a happy life by winning every race, but by learning which races were never worth running. He told her that asking for help was not weakness, it was the same wisdom that kept old engines running long after newer ones had broken down from neglect. Over the following weeks, something quietly began to shift inside their family. Emily started talking to her mother again about the pressure she carried, something she had hidden for nearly a year. She reached out to an old friend she had distanced herself from, only to discover that friend had been struggling in painful silence too. She slowly stopped measuring her worth by likes, comments, and curated photos that never told the whole story. Walter noticed her laughter return, not louder than before, but steadier, more honest, more her own. She started keeping a small notebook by her bed, writing down one true thing about her day instead of one photo to share with strangers. On a Sunday months later, as they sat once again on the same porch, Emily turned to her grandfather and thanked him for asking the one question no one else had thought to ask. Walter simply smiled and told her that sometimes the smallest questions carry the heaviest truths, and that listening, not lecturing, is often the most powerful gift one generation can give another. He reminded her that real strength was never about appearing perfect, but about being honest enough to let someone else see you struggling. As the sun disappeared behind the houses on Maple Street, Walter realized that one quiet evening, one simple question, had not only saved his granddaughter from drowning silently, but had reminded an old man that wisdom means nothing if it is never shared.